The artifact recognized him as the heir, and now the warlord's daughter has orders to kill him. The crystalline sphere pulsed once beneath Ethan's palm. Then light exploded outward, carving symbols into the air, ancient script that wrapped around his wrist like brands. The pain was immediate and absolute. He tried to pull away, but the artifact held him fast, and the temple chamber filled with a sound like breaking glass and distant thunder. When the light faded, golden marks remained on his skin, intricate, permanent. Shit! The word echoed in the empty ruin. Ethan stared at his forearm, where alien glyphs now glowed faintly beneath his skin. 600 years, this artifact had sat dormant in collapsed tunnels beneath the northern wastes. 6 centuries since the Kethran Empire tore itself apart in civil war. And he'd just woken it up. His portable scanner was going insane, readings spiking across every spectrum. Ethan fumbled for it with his free hand. The artifact had finally released him and tried to make sense of the data. Genetic match confirmed. Heir designation, primary. No, he said to the empty chamber. Absolutely not. The artifact pulsed again, warmer now against his palm, like it was pleased. Ethan had been on this planet for 3 months, cataloging ruins for the University of Terrassa. Quiet work, safe work, the kind of job where the biggest danger was tripping over your own equipment in the dark, not getting marked by a dead Empire's succession device. He needed to get back to the surface, contact his supervisor, figure out what the hell he'd just triggered and how to undo it. The thought had barely formed when the temple's walls shuddered. Dust rained from ancient stone. Somewhere above, rock groaned and shifted. The tunnels were collapsing, no, not collapsing. Opening, passages that had been sealed for centuries were grinding open, responding to the artifact's activation. Ethan ran. The scanner bounced against his hip as he sprinted through corridors that hadn't seen light in 600 years. Behind him, the temple chamber blazed with energy as the artifact's systems came fully online. Ahead, the makeshift tunnel he'd used to enter was filling with debris. He cleared it seconds before the ceiling came down. Fresh air hit him as he burst onto the surface. The northern wastes stretched in every direction, barren rock and windswept plains under a violet sky. His survey shuttle sat 100 meters away, small and fragile against the wilderness. Ethan was halfway there when the sky tore open. Not metaphorically. The air ripped like fabric, and a ship dropped through the breach, sleek, predatory, painted in the crimson and black of the Kethran ascendancy. Current rulers of this sector, warlords who claimed legitimacy from the Empire's ashes, and who would very much not appreciate someone else being marked as heir. The ship's weapons charged with a rising whine. Ethan dove behind an outcropping as plasma fire vaporized the ground where he'd been standing. His shuttle exploded in a ball of flame, taking all his equipment, his research, and his ride off this planet with it. He pressed against the rock, breathing hard. The marks on his arm pulsed in time with his heartbeat, warm and insistent. The artifact, still somehow connected to him, was broadcasting his location. Perfect. The ship circled once, scanning. Then it landed 50 meters away, settling onto the cracked earth with the grace of a hunting cat. The boarding ramp descended. One figure emerged. Female. Kethran. Moving with the fluid precision of someone who'd spent her life training to kill. Crimson skin caught the fading sunlight, darker along her throat and the backs of her hands. Black horns swept back from her temples in elegant curves. Gold eyes tracked across the landscape, luminous and cold. She wore light armor, form-fitting and practical. 2 blades crossed her back. A sidearm rode her hip, and she was walking straight toward his hiding spot. Ethan checked his supplies. One emergency beacon useless with his shuttle destroyed. A field knife, a half-empty canteen, against a Kethran warrior. Great odds. She stopped 10 meters away. "You may as well come out, human." Her voice was lower than he expected, carrying easily across the wasteland. Accented but clear. The artifact's signal makes you easy to find, she continued. Running will only make this take longer. Ethan stayed put. His mind raced through options. None of them were good. I am Kaelith, she called, daughter of Warlord Threxis, first blade of the Ascendancy. I have been sent to end the disruption you have caused. Translation: she was here to kill him. The disruption I caused, Ethan called back. I was just doing my job. Your job activated a succession device. Her tone suggested this was a capital offense. You have been marked as heir to the Kethran throne. I didn't mean to. Your intent is irrelevant. She moved closer, still fluid, still deliberate. The artifact has chosen. You must be eliminated before others learn of this. Ethan's hand found the field knife. Not much of a weapon against a trained assassin, but it was something. Look, he said, standing slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. I'm an archaeologist. I study dead things. I have no interest in your throne or your politics. She was already moving. Fast. Impossibly fast. Ethan barely got his knife up before she was on him. Her blade met his with a screech of metal, and the force of the impact nearly tore the weapon from his grip. She flowed around his guard, striking again, and he threw himself sideways, instinct screaming. Her blade whispered past his throat. He rolled, came up in a crouch. His archaeology training had included basic self-defense. Tomb raiding attracted violent types, but he was wildly outclassed. Kaelith regarded him with something like disappointment. You survived the first exchange. Most don't. I'm a quick learner. Not quick enough. She lunged again, and this time he barely avoided the strike. Her blade carved through the rock where his head had been, splitting stone like it was nothing. Enhanced edge, military grade. He needed distance, room to think. But she gave him neither, pressing forward with relentless efficiency. Each strike came faster than the last, and Ethan found himself retreating, blocking desperately, his knife ringing against her blade. This was going to end badly, very badly. And then the artifact pulsed, not just in him, in her. Kaelith froze mid-strike, her eyes widening. Gold light blazed along her forearms, identical marks to his own burning into existence beneath her skin. She staggered backward, blade falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. What? Her voice was strangled. What did you do? Nothing, Ethan gasped. I swear I didn't. The ground beneath them erupted with golden light. Glyphs carved themselves into the stone, forming a circle around both of them. Ancient Kethran script, glowing with the same energy that marked their skin. Dual designation confirmed. Bloodline recognition, primary and secondary. Failsafe initiated. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, speaking directly into their minds. Ancient, automated, absolute. Heirs must remain in proximity. Separation beyond designated threshold will result in termination. Duration, until succession is resolved or failsafe is deactivated at Temple of Origin. Then the light faded, leaving only the marks on their skin and a sudden, terrible understanding. Kaelith stared at her forearms, at the golden glyphs that matched his. Her expression was frozen somewhere between fury and horror. No, she whispered. Ethan shared the sentiment. It recognized you, he said quietly. Your bloodline, impossible. But she was staring at the marks. My lineage is documented. We are descended from the Ascendancy's founders. Not, she stopped. Her jaw worked. Not the Imperial line. Apparently the artifact disagrees. Her gold eyes snapped to him. This is your fault. I didn't exactly plan this. You activated the device. By accident. She took 3 steps away from him. Then 4. Then pain. White-hot and immediate, searing through both of them simultaneously. The marks on their skin flared brilliant gold, burning, and Ethan collapsed to one knee with a choked sound. Across from him, Kaelith gasped, her hand flying to her chest. The pain stopped when she stepped closer. They stared at each other, breathing hard. 30 meters, Ethan managed. I'd guess the threshold is about 30 meters. Kaelith looked at him with undisguised hatred. You have sentenced us both to death. I'm not thrilled about it either. My father will not accept this." Her voice was cold, controlled despite the fear beneath it. "The ascendancy cannot acknowledge a dual claim, especially not with," she stopped, jaw clenched, "a human. The feeling's mutual." Ethan pushed to his feet, still catching his breath. "So what happens now?" Kaelith retrieved her blade, sheathing it with deliberate precision. "Now we survive long enough to reach the Temple of Origin, where the failsafe can be deactivated." "Where's the Temple of Origin?" "The Imperial capital, deep in Ascendancy territory." She met his eyes. "Where my father's forces control every approach. So we're walking into the heart of the people who want me dead." "Yes, great plan." Her expression suggested she shared his assessment of their odds. Behind them, her ship's communication system came online with a harsh chirp. Automated check-in, broadcasting to whoever sent her. In seconds, someone would notice she hadn't confirmed the kill. Kaelith's hand moved to her comm device. She stared at it for 3 long seconds. Then she crushed it beneath her boot. "What? We're going silent." Her voice was flat. "If they learn you still live, they will send others. If they learn I am marked." She trailed off, but the implication was clear. She'd become just as much a target as him. Ethan's mind raced. So we're both fugitives now. It would seem so. Fantastic. He looked at the wreckage of his shuttle, still burning in the distance. "Any chance your ship has supplies?" Kaelith was already moving toward it, and Ethan had to follow. Couldn't get more than 20-something meters away without agony. He hated that she was right about the threshold. The ship was small but well-equipped. Military rations, medical supplies, weapons, and thankfully water. Kaelith moved through the space with practiced efficiency, gathering what they'd need. "How long to reach the capital?" Ethan asked. 3 days if we push hard, longer if we try to avoid detection." She pulled up a tactical display. "We have maybe 6 hours before they send the second team. Less if they suspect something's wrong. Can we make it?" "Unknown." She met his eyes. "I was sent alone because my success was assumed. The next team will be a kill squad. Multiple ships, heavy weapons. Because they really want me dead." "Yes, and you were supposed to make that happen." Something flickered across her expression. "I was, but now you can't. The artifact has. Complicated matters." She turned back to the tactical display. "We need to move. Now." Ethan grabbed a pack, loading it with supplies. His hands moved automatically while his mind tried to process everything that had just happened. An hour ago, he'd been cataloging ruins. Now he was bonded to an alien assassin and running for his life from an interstellar warlord. Archaeology was supposed to be boring. "How much do you know about the succession device?" Kaelith asked, not looking at him. "Only what's in historical records. The Empire used them to prevent succession wars, artifacts that would recognize legitimate heirs through genetic markers. If no clear heir existed, the artifacts would trigger a failsafe to prevent civil war." He paused. "This is the first one anyone's found intact. And you touched it. I'm an archaeologist. Touching things is literally my job." She made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. "Your job may have just rewritten the political structure of this entire sector." "I'm aware." Kaelith finished loading her pack and headed for the ramp. "We move in 5 minutes. Stay close." "Don't really have a choice about that." She shot him a look over her shoulder, not quite hostile anymore, just calculating, like she was reassessing everything she'd assumed about this situation. Ethan followed her down the ramp and into the wasteland. The violet sky was darkening toward night. Temperature was already dropping. Northern wastes got brutally cold after sunset. They had maybe 2 hours of usable light left. "We head southeast," Kaelith said, orienting herself by the stars. "There's a transport hub 300 kilometers out. If we can reach it before the search expands, we might be able to secure a ship. And if we can't, then we walk 3,000 kilometers through hostile territory and hope we don't die of exposure first." "You're really selling this plan." She ignored him. setting a punishing pace across the broken ground. Ethan fell into step beside her, his archaeologist's stamina immediately tested by her soldier's efficiency. They walked in silence for the first hour. Kaelith's eyes constantly scanned the horizon, watching for threats. Her horns caught the fading light, elegant and lethal. The marks on her forearms were still faintly visible, golden beneath crimson skin. She caught him looking. "Something to say, human?" "Ethan, my name is Ethan." "I know your name. Your entire file was provided." "My file? Species, origin, occupation, psychological profile, known associates, threat assessment." She said it matter-of-factly. "Standard briefing for a termination contract." "That's disturbing. That is efficiency." She adjusted the pack on her shoulders. "You are Ethan Reeves, 32 years old, born on New Alexandria, doctorate in xenoarchaeology from the University of Terrassa. You have no criminal record, no military service, and no political affiliations. You were deemed a minimal threat. Guess that assessment changed." "Yes." They walked another kilometer before Ethan spoke again. "What about you? Do I get a file?" Kaelith's expression didn't change. "I am Kaelith, daughter of Warlord Threxis, first blade of the Ascendancy. I have trained in combat since I was 5 years old. I have completed 37 contracts without failure." She paused. "Until today, sorry about that. Save your apology." But her tone had lost some of its edge. "This situation is unprecedented. That's one word for it." The sun finally set, plunging the wasteland into darkness broken only by starlight. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in minutes. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter, breath misting in the cold. Kaelith seemed unaffected. Her people were adapted for this world's extremes, temperature regulation that humans lacked. Still, she slowed the pace slightly when she noticed him struggling with the cold. "We'll stop in another hour," she said. "There's shelter ahead." "How do you know?" "I scouted this region before your arrival. Standard protocol." She gestured toward a distant rock formation, barely visible against the stars. "Caves, defensible. We can rest there without freezing. You really are prepared for everything." "I was trained to be." They reached the caves as the temperature became genuinely dangerous. The formation offered multiple entrances, but Kaelith chose one that provided good sightlines while being difficult to approach unseen. Inside, the temperature was merely cold instead of lethal. Ethan collapsed against the stone wall, exhausted. His legs were screaming from the forced march, and his body was still processing the adrenaline crash from the fight and the artifact's activation. Kaelith set her pack down with careful precision. "We take turns keeping watch, 2 hours each. I'll take first watch. You can barely stand." "Neither can you." She met his eyes, and for the first time, Ethan saw the cracks in her composure. She was holding it together through sheer discipline, but the day had shaken her badly. Failed mission, marked by the artifact, bonded to her target. Everything she'd been trained for had just become useless. "I'll take first watch," she repeated, quieter now. "You need rest." Ethan wanted to argue, but fatigue was winning. He nodded, pulling out his emergency blanket, thin but better than nothing. The cave floor was cold stone, but after the last few hours, it felt almost comfortable. "Kaelith," she looked at him from her position near the entrance. "Thank you for not killing me." Her expression was unreadable. "I didn't have a choice. You could have tried harder. The artifact might not have recognized you if you'd succeeded quickly." "Perhaps." She turned back to the darkness beyond the cave. "Rest, Ethan. We have a long way to go." He closed his eyes, listening to the wind howl across the wastes. Tomorrow they'd be running again. Hunted, marked, bound together by an artifact neither of them wanted. But tonight they were alive. It was something. Ethan woke to the sound of engines. He was on his feet instantly, adrenaline spiking. Kaelith stood at the cave entrance, perfectly still, watching the sky. 3 ships, smaller than hers had been. Faster. They were crisscrossing the wasteland in a search pattern, scanners painting the ground with sweeping beams. The kill squad. How long? Ethan whispered. They arrived 20 minutes ago. So far they haven't detected us. She pulled back deeper into the cave. But they're expanding their search radius. We need to move. It's still dark. Better than being found. She had a point. They gathered their gear in silence, moving with the speed that came from urgency and fear. The ships were still distant, but closing. Each pass brought them nearer. Kaelith led them out through a rear exit, one that opened into a narrow ravine running southeast. It would provide cover from aerial scans, barely, but it also funneled them into a predictable path. They'll check this eventually, Ethan said. Then we move faster. They ran, not the forced march pace from yesterday. This was a sprint, survival speed, burning energy they couldn't afford to waste. The ravine twisted through the wasteland, walls rising on either side. Above, the stars were fading toward dawn. Behind them, engines grew louder. One of the ships had broken from the search pattern, heading their direction. They've picked up the artifact's signal, Kaelith gasped. It's too strong now, too concentrated. Can we shut it off? Unknown. The ravine opened into a wider canyon. Bad terrain, too exposed. But there was nowhere else to go. The ship appeared over the ridge, spotlights blazing. They'd been found. Kaelith's hand went to her blade. Run. What are you? Run. She shoved him forward, then turned to face the ship as it descended. Her blade came free, catching the searchlight. A futile gesture against a gunship, but she didn't run. Ethan stopped. The ship's weapons charged, and something shifted in his chest. The artifact, the marks, suddenly blazed hot against his skin. Not pain, power, he didn't think. Couldn't afford to, he just reached. The canyon exploded with golden light. It poured from the marks on his arms, from his chest, cascading outward in waves that carved geometric patterns into the air. Ancient glyphs, the same script that covered the succession device, materializing around them like shields. The ship fired. The plasma bolts hit the light shields and scattered, harmless. Ethan stared at his hands, at the power flowing through him, and had no idea how he was doing this or how to stop it. The artifact was responding to his desperation, to his need to protect. The ship's pilot clearly reached the same conclusion. The gunship pulled up hard, retreating to a safe distance. But they'd be back, with more ships, more weapons. The light faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Ethan swaying on his feet. Exhaustion hit like a physical blow. Whatever he'd just done had drained him completely. Kaelith caught him before he fell. What? She stared at him, then at the canyon where the light shields had burned patterns into the stone. How did you? No idea. His vision was graying at the edges. Can we run now? She didn't answer, just pulled his arm over her shoulders and started moving. Half carrying him, impossibly strong, covering ground faster than he'd thought possible. Behind them, more engines. The kill squad was converging. They weren't going to make it. Kaelith knew it too. Ethan could see the calculation in her eyes, the tactical assessment. They were minutes from being surrounded, and he was barely conscious. Then the canyon wall exploded, not from weapons fire from inside. Rock shattered outward as something massive burst through, moving with predatory speed. A creature, reptilian, easily 4 meters tall, armored hide covered in natural plating. The kind of apex predator that made humans very nervous about exploring alien worlds. It roared, a sound that shook the canyon walls, and charged straight at them. Kaelith dropped Ethan behind a boulder, her blade coming free in one fluid motion. Stay down. That thing will kill you. Better than the alternative. She met the creature head-on. What followed was brutal and beautiful and absolutely insane. Kaelith moved like water, impossibly fast, her blade finding gaps in the creature's armor. It was stronger, but she was faster, using its momentum against it, staying just ahead of claws that could have torn her apart. Blood sprayed, some of it hers. Above, the kill squad ships circled, pilots clearly uncertain. Their target was fighting a local predator. Did they intervene, risk civilian casualties, or let nature take its course. They chose wrong. The lead ship dropped lower, trying to get a clear shot at Ethan. The creature noticed. It roared again, this time at the ship, and its attention shifted. Ancient instincts recognized the greater threat. It lunged upward. The pilot never had a chance. Claws tore through the ship's hull like paper, and the vessel spun out of control, engines screaming. It crashed into the canyon wall in a ball of flame. The other ships pulled back, suddenly wary. Kaelith didn't waste the opening. She grabbed Ethan and ran, using the chaos as cover. The creature was occupied with the wreckage, and the remaining ships were too busy avoiding its attention to track two fleeing figures. They made it half a kilometer before Ethan's legs gave out completely. "I can't," he collapsed against the canyon wall. "Sorry, I've got nothing left." Kaelith looked back at the chaos behind them, then at him. Her armor was torn in 3 places, blood seeping from cuts along her ribs and forearm. But she was still standing, still thinking. "There's a cave system ahead," she said. 300 meters. Can you make it? Don't have much choice." She pulled him to his feet one more time, and they staggered forward together. The canyon walls rose higher here, shadows deepening as dawn struggled to penetrate. The caves appeared like salvation, dark openings in the stone, leading deep into the planet's crust. Kaelith chose one without hesitation, pulling them both into darkness. Inside, the temperature dropped, but at least the walls blocked scanner signals. They were invisible now, for the moment. Kaelith eased Ethan down against the wall, then collapsed beside him. They sat in darkness, breathing hard, listening to the distant sound of ships searching. "That was insane," Ethan finally managed. "Tactical opportunity. You fought that thing. It was between us and escape." He looked at her profile in the dim light filtering from the entrance. At the blood on her armor, the exhaustion she couldn't quite hide, the tension in her jaw. "You could have left me," he said quietly. "When I passed out, the artifact's range would have killed me, but you'd be free." Kaelith was silent for a long moment. "I considered it," she admitted, "for approximately 3 seconds. What stopped you?" She turned her head, gold eyes meeting his. "I don't know." They held that gaze, something shifting in the space between them. Recognition, maybe, or just the acknowledgement that their fates were bound now, whether they liked it or not. "We should tend those wounds," Ethan said. "Later, first we need distance. You're bleeding." "I'm aware." But she made no move to stop him when he pulled out the medical supplies from his pack. The cave was dark, but his hands were steady as he cleaned the cuts along her ribs. Her skin was warmer than expected, the crimson flesh yielding beneath his touch. She held perfectly still, watching him work with those unreadable gold eyes. "The artifact gave you power," she said suddenly. "The shields. Yeah, that should not be possible. The succession device marks heirs. It does not grant abilities. Maybe it's different with dual designation." Ethan sealed the largest cut with medical adhesive. "Or maybe the records are incomplete. Or maybe you are not what you appear to be." He met her eyes. "I'm exactly what I appear to be, an archaeologist who touched the wrong thing. No one is ever exactly what they appear." But something in her tone had softened. "The power you manifested, it saved us both." "I didn't mean to." "Intent matters less than result." Ethan finished with her ribs and moved to her forearm. The wound was deeper there, requiring more care. His fingers brushed the golden marks from the artifact, and Kaelith's breath caught. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "No, she trailed off. "I can feel when you touch the marks, a connection, like you're closer than you actually are." He pulled his hand back. "Sorry, don't be." She caught his wrist, gently guiding his hand back. "Finish the work." He did, hyper-aware now of every point of contact, the warmth of her skin, the strength in her grip, the way her breathing changed when his fingers traced near the glyphs. When he finished, she didn't immediately pull away. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You carried me half a kilometer. It's the least I could do." "I meant for not running when the creature appeared, for staying." Ethan shrugged. "Didn't really have much choice. 30-meter limit, remember? You could have tried. Most would have. I'm not most people. No, she was looking at him with something that might have been respect. You are not. Outside, the sound of ships had faded. The kill squad was expanding their search, assuming their targets had gone to ground. They'd be back eventually, but for now, the cave was safe. Kaelith closed her eyes, exhaustion finally winning. We rest for 4 hours, then we move again. Think we'll make it to the transport hub. Unknown. She opened one eye. But we've survived this long. That's more than I expected. Comforting. I speak only truth. Ethan leaned back against the stone, feeling every bruise and strain from the last day. His body screamed for rest. His mind refused to stop racing. Beside him, Kaelith's breathing had already evened out into something close to sleep. Even exhausted, she remained partially alert, a soldier's habit, probably. One hand rested near her blade. He watched her for a moment, this alien assassin who'd been sent to kill him and instead had saved his life. Twice now. The marks on both their arms pulsed faintly, synchronized, bound together by accident and ancient technology. Ethan closed his eyes and tried not to think about what would happen when they reached the Temple of Origin. If they reached the Temple of Origin, they didn't make it to the transport hub. The kill squad found them 6 kilometers out, cutting off their approach with a coordinated strike. 3 ships this time, moving in formation, pilots clearly briefed on the light shield incident. Kaelith pulled them into a narrow gorge, using the terrain for cover. They're boxing us in. I noticed. Can you do that thing again? The shields? I don't know. Ethan stared at his marked arms, willing the power to surface. Nothing happened. I don't know how I did it the first time. Then we fight. Against 3 gunships. Do you have a better plan? He didn't. The ships were closing, weapons charged. This time they wouldn't hesitate. And then the marks flared. Both of them simultaneously, burning gold against their skin. But this time it wasn't shields. It was something else. Knowledge. Understanding flooding in like a data stream directly into their minds. Dual heirs acknowledged. Secondary protocols active. Temple network accessible. Kaelith gasped, her hands going to her temples. What? Old temple system, Ethan managed, processing the information as fast as it came. The succession device was never just for marking heirs. It's a key to the entire Imperial network. Defense systems, transport gates, power grids, the Empire's infrastructure. Kaelith's eyes widened. It never fully shut down. It's been dormant, waiting for legitimate heirs to reactivate it. They looked at each other, understanding crystallizing. There's a gate node 2 kilometers from here, Kaelith said. Ancient transport system. If we can reach it, we can jump straight to the capital, skip the kill squad entirely, and arrive directly in my father's territory. Do we have another option? The ships were seconds away. Kaelith made the decision. Run. They ran. The knowledge from the artifact guided them, highlighting paths through the gorge that led toward the old gate node. It felt surreal, having ancient Imperial data downloaded directly into their consciousness, like the Empire's ghost was speaking through 6 centuries of silence. Behind them, plasma fire scorched the rocks. The ships had visual contact now. Ahead, the gorge opened into a crater, and in the center, half buried in centuries of debris, was the gate. It was massive, 30 meters across, covered in the same script that marked their skin. Currently dormant, Dark. Can you activate it? Kaelith called over the sound of pursuing engines. Maybe, if I... The ships broke line of sight. Ethan sprinted for the gate, Kaelith at his side. His hands hit the ancient metal, and the marks on his arms blazed brilliant gold. The gate woke. Power surged through dormant systems, lights racing along the circular frame. The air inside the ring shimmered, reality bending, and a portal opened, showing a different place, different sky, different world. The capital. Now, Ethan shouted. They jumped through as the first plasma bolt hit the gate behind them. Reality twisted. For 3 seconds, Ethan existed in no place and every place, the gate network stretching across space in ways human physics couldn't explain. He felt Kaelith beside him, her presence solid even as everything else became fluid. Then they were through. They hit solid ground hard, rolling, gasping. The air was different here, warmer, with a faint metallic taste. The sky was deeper violet, 3 small moons visible even in daylight. The Imperial capital. Ethan pushed to his feet, taking in their surroundings. They'd emerged in ruins, ancient structures overgrown with alien vegetation. But beyond the ruins, visible in the distance, was a city. Massive spires, military installations, the seat of ascendancy power. "Where exactly are we?" he asked. Kaelith was already orienting herself. Southern edge, Old Quarter. The active city is 15 kilometers north. And the Temple of Origin, center of the old city, 5 kilometers. She pointed toward a structure visible through the ruins. There, it dominated the skyline, a pyramid of dark stone and metal, still intact after 6 centuries. The Temple of Origin, where the succession device was forged, where the failsafe could be deactivated, where they'd find answers. Or death. Kaelith started walking, and Ethan followed. The ruins around them were hauntingly beautiful, architecture that spoke of empire in its prime. Now it was home to scavengers and ghosts. "Your father's forces control the capital?" Ethan asked. "Every approach, every exit, coming here was," she paused, "bold. That's one word for it." They moved through the ruins in tense silence, hyper-alert for threats. But the old quarter was surprisingly empty. Most activity had shifted to the new city, leaving this area to decay. Kaelith stopped suddenly, her hand going to her blade. "What? Someone's following us." Ethan looked back, saw nothing. "Are you sure?" Yes, she was right. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit. They wore ascendancy armor, weapons drawn. But these weren't Kill Squad. These were something else. The leader stepped forward, removing her helmet. She had the same crimson skin as Kaelith, the same black horns. But her eyes were harder, older. "Kaelith," the woman said, "you were reported dead." Clearly the report was premature, Commander Sileth. Kaelith's voice was carefully neutral. "What brings the Imperial Guard to the ruins?" "You do." Sileth's gaze shifted to Ethan. "And the human? He is my concern. He is the Ascendancy's concern." Sileth moved closer, her 2 guards flanking. "Word has spread. An activated succession device. A human marked as heir. Your father is. Displeased? I'm sure he is. He sent me to retrieve you both, alive." Sileth smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "For now." Kaelith's stance shifted slightly. "Combat ready. We cannot come with you." That was not a request. Nevertheless, tension crystallized in the space between them. Ethan could feel violence about to erupt. Then the marks flared again. This time it hit all 3 Kethran soldiers simultaneously. Sileth and her guards staggered, gold light blazing along their forearms. The same marks. The same recognition. Additional bloodline detected. Tertiary designation confirmed. Sileth stared at her arms in horror. "What is this?" "The artifact recognizes your lineage," Ethan said quietly. "You're descended from the Imperial line too." "Impossible. My family." Sileth stopped. Looked at Kaelith. "How long have you been marked?" 2 days. "And you did not report," understanding dawned. "The human, you were sent to eliminate him." "Yes. But instead, you've bonded with him." Sileth's expression was unreadable. "This changes everything." "I know." Sileth turned to her guards. Both were staring at their newly marked arms, clearly processing the same revelation. Their entire understanding of their lineage had just been overturned. "The ascendancy is built on a lie," one guard whispered. "Silence." But Sileth's voice was shaken. She looked at Kaelith. "The Temple of Origin, you're heading there. To deactivate the failsafe. Or to claim the throne. I have no interest in the throne. Neither did I until 3 seconds ago." Sileth met her eyes. But the artifact has acknowledged us. Multiple heirs. The Empire's ghost is speaking through 600 years of silence, and it's saying our entire political structure is based on false genealogy. What are you suggesting? Kaelith asked. That we find the truth, together. Silith sheathed her weapon. Before my orders change to kill on sight. It was the last thing Ethan expected. But when he looked at Kaelith, saw the calculation in her eyes, he understood. More marked heirs meant more legitimacy, more protection, more leverage. You'll help us reach the temple? Kaelith asked. We'll get you there. Silith looked toward the pyramid. After that, we'll see what the Empire's ghost has to say. They moved through the ruins with Silith's unit as escort, a strange alliance born from shared marks and mutual confusion. The guards, brothers named Corvin and Thale, were still processing their new reality, touching their glowing forearms like the marks might disappear. Ethan found himself walking beside Silith. How much do you know about the Empire's fall? She asked. Only what's in historical records, civil war, multiple claimants to the throne. The planet tore itself apart. The official story, Silith said. The ascendancy's story. But if the artifact is marking bloodlines that our records claim don't exist, she trailed off. What else have we been lied to about? That's what we need to find out. Ahead, Kaelith moved with Corvin and Thale, explaining the failsafe and the 30-meter binding. The brothers listened with the intensity of soldiers receiving mission briefing. They'd been walking for 2 hours when the second patrol found them. This time, there was no negotiation. The Ascendancy soldiers opened fire without warning, plasma bolts screaming through the ruins. Silith's unit responded instantly, returning fire while pulling everyone into cover. They know, Silith shouted over the chaos. About the marks. How? Kaelith's blade was already in her hand. Someone talked. Someone always talks. The firefight was brutal and fast. Ethan pressed himself against a crumbling wall while trained soldiers traded shots overhead. This wasn't his world. He was an archaeologist, not a warrior. But the marks on his arms disagreed. Power surged unbidden, the same golden light from before exploding outward. It formed barriers again, geometric shields that absorbed incoming fire. But this time, Ethan felt himself shaping it, directing it, protecting his allies. The Ascendancy soldiers hesitated, clearly not briefed on this capability. It was all the opening Kaelith needed. She moved like death itself, closing the distance before they could adjust. Her blade carved through armor, precise and lethal. Beside her, Silith fought with equal skill, and within seconds the patrol was neutralized. The silence after violence was always strange. Ethan's ears rang from weapons fire, his heart hammering. We need to move, Silith said, checking her soldiers. Before reinforcements arrive. They ran. The temple loomed larger as they approached, its pyramid structure dominating the skyline. Ancient and imposing, it had survived 6 centuries of war and neglect. Up close, Ethan could see the script covering every surface, the same glyphs now marking 6 people. The entrance was sealed. Massive doors, 20 meters tall, etched with more script. No visible mechanism, no way to force them. Ethan approached, feeling the power in his marks intensifying. The temple recognized him, recognized all of them. He placed his hand on the door. Golden light spread from his palm, racing along the script, and the doors ground open. Beyond was darkness. Stay close, Kaelith said, moving to his side. We don't know what's in there. They entered together, the 6 marked heirs stepping into the heart of the dead empire. Inside, the temple was vast, a single chamber rising hundreds of meters, walls covered in glowing script. And in the center, on a raised platform, was the source. The prime succession device. It was massive, easily 10 meters across, a perfect sphere of crystalline metal hovering above the platform. The same design as the one Ethan had activated, but on an impossible scale. And it was active. Light pulsed within the sphere, casting shifting shadows. As they approached, the light intensified, focusing on each of them in turn. Then it spoke. 6 heirs confirmed. Genetic markers verified across primary, secondary, and tertiary lineages. Succession crisis resolution protocol initiated. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, ancient and absolute. "What is the succession crisis?" Ethan called out. "Dual heirs detected with equal claim. Standard succession protocols inadequate. Alternative resolution required." "What alternative?" Trial of unity. Dual heirs must demonstrate capacity for joint rule through coordinated action and shared purpose. Failure results in termination of both candidates. Kaelith stepped forward. "And if we refuse?" Failsafe will activate. All marked individuals will be terminated to prevent civil war. The chamber went very quiet. "How long do we have?" Ethan asked. 12 hours. Trial begins at dawn. Temple will provide testing grounds. 12 hours to prove they could rule together, or they all died. "Fantastic," Ethan muttered. Silith was staring at the device. Trial of unity. There are historical references, tests of worthiness, combat, strategy, moral judgment. "How many heirs survived historically?" Kaelith asked. "Fewer than half." "Of course." The prime device pulsed again, and new information flooded in. Not overwhelming this time, controlled. Deliberate. The parameters of the trial. What would be tested? What failure looked like? They had until dawn to prepare, and no way to escape. They made camp in one of the temple's antechambers, a space that had once housed Imperial guards. Now it was empty stone and fading grandeur. Silith's unit set up a defensive perimeter while Ethan and Kaelith studied the trial parameters. It wasn't encouraging. 3 stages, Kaelith summarized. Combat, strategy, and judgment. Each stage requires both heirs to succeed simultaneously. If one fails, both are eliminated. And the other marked heirs? Observers only. Unless we fail, then they're terminated too, apparently. No pressure. Kaelith looked at him across the projection of the trial grounds. "We've known each other for 2 days. Most of that time, you've been either unconscious, or we've been running for our lives." "Your point?" "My point is that coordinated action requires trust and understanding. We have neither. Then we'd better develop some quickly." She was quiet for a moment. "You're not afraid?" "Oh, I'm terrified. I'm just good at pretending otherwise." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "At least you're honest." They worked through the night, planning, discussing, trying to build the foundation of partnership. Ethan learned that Kaelith had been trained since childhood for assassination work, that she'd never questioned her father's authority until the artifact marked her, that she had 3 sisters, all of whom believed her dead by now. Kaelith learned that Ethan had stumbled into archaeology almost by accident, that he'd lost his parents to a transport accident when he was 16, that he'd never expected to leave his quiet academic life. Silith joined them around midnight, bringing rations and tactical advice. "The combat trial will be straightforward. Kill what needs killing, protect each other. You'll manage that." "And the other stages?" Ethan asked. "Strategy will test your ability to think together, coordinate solutions to impossible problems." She paused. "That's where most historical attempts failed. Even compatible heirs struggle to merge their tactical thinking under pressure." "What about judgment?" Silith's expression darkened. "That's the one that kills the most. The Empire's final test. You'll face moral choices with no good answers. The device reads your intent, your reasoning. If you prioritize personal gain over the Empire's well-being, you fail." "And we have to reach the same conclusion?" Kaelith asked. "Independently, but simultaneously." Silith met her eyes. The Empire wanted rulers who thought alike, who would reach the same moral judgments without consultation. "That's impossible," Ethan said. "We're different species, different cultures." "Yes," Silith stood, "which is why I'm not optimistic." She left them to their planning. Dawn came too quickly. The temple woke with them, lights blazing along every surface. The prime device pulsed, summoning them to the central chamber. The 6 marked heirs gathered before it. Trial begins. First stage, combat. The floor beneath them shifted, stone reshaping itself into an arena. The chamber's dimensions expanded impossibly, space warping until they stood in a coliseum that shouldn't fit within the temple's walls. On the opposite end, gates ground open. What emerged made Ethan's blood run cold. Constructs, imperial war machines that had been dormant for 6 centuries. They were massive, humanoid, but clearly artificial, armed with weapons that made modern military tech look primitive. 6 constructs, 1 for each marked heir. Objective, survival. Dual heirs must remain alive. Additional heirs may assist, but primary defense responsibility lies with Ethan and Kaelith. "Stay behind me," Kaelith said, blade already in hand. "That won't work," Ethan replied. "We need to coordinate, use the power the artifact gave us. You don't know how to fight. Then you'll have to teach me fast." The constructs charged. Silith's unit engaged immediately, drawing 3 of the machines away. But 3 remained focused on Ethan and Kaelith, moving with mechanical precision. Kaelith met the first construct head-on, her blade finding gaps in its armor. But these machines were designed to kill, and even her skill was barely enough to keep it at bay. Ethan's marks flared, power responding to his desperation. Golden light formed around his hands, and he realized he could shape it, mold it into weapons or shields. He'd never fought anything in his life. Now he had no choice. The construct swung for him, and he threw up a shield. It held barely. The impact sent him stumbling back. Kaelith appeared beside him, blade flashing. Together, she took point, he provided cover. It was clumsy, uncoordinated, but they were learning in real time. Every exchange taught them more about how to work together, how to read each other's movements. His shields caught attacks she couldn't see coming. Her blade found openings his power created. They moved closer, naturally gravitating to within 5 meters of each other. The marks on their arms pulsed in sync, and suddenly Ethan could feel her intent. Not telepathy, just awareness. He knew when she was going to strike. She knew when he'd need to shield. They fought as one. The construct fell. Across the arena, Silith's unit was struggling. Corvin was down, Thale bleeding from a dozen cuts. Silith herself was barely keeping her construct at bay. "Help them," Ethan said. Kaelith didn't question. They moved together, flowing across the arena with newfound coordination. His shields protected both of them while she carved through the constructs with surgical precision. Within minutes, all 6 machines lay in ruins. The arena dissolved back into the temple's central chamber. First stage complete. Coordination adequate. Trust developing. Second stage begins in 1 hour. They collapsed against the temple walls, exhausted and bloodied but alive. "That was," Thale started. "Insane," Corvin finished, clutching his ribs. Ethan looked at Kaelith. She was breathing hard, gold eyes bright with adrenaline. When their eyes met, something passed between them. Recognition, partnership, maybe the beginning of trust. "1 stage down," she said quietly. 2 to go. They had 1 hour to prepare for strategy, 1 hour to learn each other's minds. It wasn't enough time. It would have to be. The second stage materialized around them without warning. They stood in a simulation, a fleet command center, holographic displays showing a massive military crisis. 2 fleets locked in combat. Civilian transports caught in the crossfire. Multiple objectives, all critical, all simultaneous. Objective, minimize casualties. Preserve infrastructure. Win the engagement. You have 15 minutes. The scenario was impossible. There was no way to achieve all 3 objectives with the resources provided, which meant they had to find a 4th option. Ethan's archaeology background kicked in. He was trained to see patterns, to find connections others missed. He studied the fleet positions, the civilian ships, the battlefield topology. Beside him, Kaelith was running tactical simulations, her military training analyzing attack vectors and defensive positions. They needed to think together. Ethan pointed to a debris field between the fleets. What if we use that? Debris doesn't provide meaningful cover. Not for cover, for camouflage. He pulled up sensor data. The field is creating interference. Both fleets are partially blind. Kaelith's eyes widened. We could hide the civilian transports in the interference, make them invisible to both sides. While creating the illusion, they're evacuating away from the battle, drawing both fleets away from the actual escape route. She was already inputting commands. It could work. They moved in perfect sync, their plans merging naturally. His pattern recognition combined with her tactical expertise created solutions neither could have reached alone. The simulation responded to their commands. Civilian ships disappeared into the debris field's sensor shadow. Both fleets, believing their targets had fled, disengaged to pursue phantom signatures. The civilians escaped. The battle ended without further casualties. Infrastructure remained intact. Second stage complete. Strategic compatibility confirmed. Third stage begins now. No rest this time. The temple plunged them immediately into the final trial. Judgment. They stood in darkness. Just the two of them, isolated from the others. A voice spoke, not the prime device's mechanical tone. Something older, more alien. The empire fell because its rulers could not agree on fundamental questions. You will face 3 scenarios. You must reach the same moral conclusion for each. Consultation is prohibited. 3 scenarios materialized as holographic possibilities. The first showed a colony world, disease spreading. 2 potential responses: quarantine the planet, saving billions elsewhere, but condemning millions to death. Or allow trade to continue, risking pandemic, but potentially finding a cure through continued research and resources. Ethan stared at the scenario, his mind racing through implications. Beside him, Kaelith was doing the same. They couldn't speak, couldn't discuss. They had to reach the same answer independently. Ethan thought about value of life, about utilitarian math versus individual dignity, about the kind of empire he'd want to live in. He made his choice. Limited quarantine with aggressive resource allocation to cure research. Not total isolation, not uncontrolled spread. The middle path that acknowledged both collective safety and individual worth. Kaelith made hers. Golden light connected them. Agreement reached. Reasoning aligned. Second scenario. The next showed 2 leaders, both competent, both flawed. One prioritized military strength, but was corrupt. One prioritized civilian welfare, but was weak in foreign policy. Choose one to lead a critical sector. No perfect answer. Only compromises. Ethan analyzed. Kaelith analyzed. They both chose the civilian leader. Strength could be built, but corruption rotted from within. Agreement. Final scenario. This one was personal. It showed them. Ethan and Kaelith, marked as co-heirs, but with a choice. One could take sole power if the other willingly stepped aside. The empire would be stronger with singular rule, more efficient, less prone to deadlock. All one of them had to do was claim sole authority, and the other had to accept it. Ethan looked at the scenario, at the version of himself taking power alone. It would be easier, cleaner. He could step aside, let Kaelith rule. She was trained for this, raised for leadership. It made logical sense, but it was wrong, not because of pride or ambition. Because the empire had fallen specifically because of singular rule, because of the inability to balance different perspectives. The artifact had marked them both for a reason. Unity wasn't weakness, it was strength. He made his choice, shared rule, equal authority, together or not at all. Beside him, Kaelith stood motionless. This was it. If she chose to take sole power, he'd accept it. Step aside. Let her rule alone. The marks on their arms pulsed. Golden light blazed between them. Agreement reached. Both heirs reject singular authority. Choose partnership. Choose unity. The darkness shattered. They stood in the temple's central chamber again, the prime device blazing with light. But this time, the others were there too, Kaelith and her unit, watching with held breath. Trial of unity complete. Dual heirs validated. Genetic markers confirmed. Succession crisis resolved. "What does that mean?" Ethan asked. "You are recognized as co-emperors of the Kethran Empire. The failsafe is deactivated. The marks are permanent but no longer binding. You may separate without consequence." Freedom, they'd survived. But more than that, they'd been validated, recognized, crowned, imperial authority transferred, network access granted, all systems responding to dual command. The empire is yours to restore or reform. The weight of those words hit like a physical force. They weren't just free. They were rulers of an empire that had been dead for 6 centuries, of a political structure that currently existed only in ruins and historical records. And the current government, the ascendancy, was built on the lie that the imperial line had died out. "This is going to cause problems," Kaelith said quietly. "Just a few," Ethan agreed. Kaelith stepped forward, and to their shock, she knelt. "My emperors." Corvin and Thale followed suit. Ethan wanted to tell them to stand up, that this was insane, that he was an archaeologist, not a ruler. But the marks on his arms pulsed with imperial authority, and he understood. They'd changed everything. The question was what they'd do with that change. 3 days later, they stood on the temple's highest platform, looking out over the capital. News had spread fast. An activated succession device, legitimate heirs, the empire's ghost waking after 6 centuries. The ascendancy's response had been complicated. Warlord Threxis, Kaelith's father, had demanded an audience. Half the sector's governments were screaming about political instability. The other half were scrambling to align with the newly crowned emperors. "We could refuse," Ethan said. "Walk away, the marks aren't binding anymore." "We could," Kaelith agreed, "but we won't." "Why not?" She turned to look at him, gold eyes serious. "Because the empire fell apart because its rulers prioritized personal power over collective good. We've been given a chance to do better. We're probably going to fail. Probably." A slight smile. "But we'll fail together." Ethan found himself smiling back. "That's the worst inspirational speech I've ever heard." "I'm a soldier, not a politician." "Co-emperor," he corrected. "You're a co-emperor now." "So are you." Archaeologist turned ruler. "The university will never believe it." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sun set over the ruins of empire. Tomorrow they'd meet with the ascendancy leadership, start the impossible process of building something new from 6 centuries of ashes. But tonight they had this moment. "Kaelith?" "Yes. Thank you for not killing me." She laughed, the first real laugh he'd heard from her. "Thank you for making it impossible." The marks on their arms pulsed softly, synchronized, not binding anymore, just connected, partners. "Think we'll survive this?" Ethan asked. "If we're lucky." She met his eyes. "And if we work together?" "Together," he agreed. "Sounds good." The sun set, painting the ruins gold, and 2 unlikely emperors watched the darkness come, knowing that dawn would bring challenges neither was prepared for. But they'd face them together. It was a start. 6 months later, the imperial court was a study in controlled chaos. Ethan stood before a holographic display showing the current political situation, which was, to put it mildly, complicated. The ascendancy had fractured, with some warlords accepting the new emperor's authority and others declaring independence. Dozens of planets were petitioning for admission to the reformed empire. The old imperial bureaucracy was slowly waking up, automated systems responding to dual-air commands after centuries of dormancy. It was overwhelming. It was impossible. They were managing anyway. Kaelith entered the command center, and Ethan felt her presence before he saw her. The marks still connected them, though the binding had been removed. They could be on opposite sides of a planet now without pain. But they rarely were. The Outer Reach delegation arrived, she said. They want to discuss trade agreements. Did you tell them we're still figuring out what we're doing? They assumed as much. She moved to stand beside him, studying the display. The northern provinces are stabilizing. Silith's work, mostly. Kaelith had become their military commander, coordinating security across reformed imperial space. Corvin and Thale led specialized units, hunting down the worst of the warlords who refused to acknowledge the new order. Your father sent another message, Ethan said carefully. Kaelith's expression didn't change, but he felt the tension through their connection. What does he want? Meeting, neutral ground. He's offering partial surrender if we'll grant him governorship of his current territories. He's trying to salvage his position. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. What do you think? I think he's dangerous, but also potentially useful. He has resources, territory, military experience we need. Ethan turned to face her. But he tried to have us both killed, multiple times. He was protecting what he believed to be his legitimate authority. Does that make it better? No, she met his eyes, but it makes it understandable. This was the kind of decision they faced daily now. No good answers, only compromises and calculated risks. We decide together, Ethan said. Like we always do. Kaelith smiled slightly. Co-emperors. Co-emperors. They'd learned to work together over the past 6 months, learned each other's strengths and weaknesses. Ethan provided perspective, seeing patterns in historical data that informed modern decisions. Kaelith provided tactical expertise and cultural understanding that kept them from making fatal mistakes. Together, they were better than either would have been alone, which was exactly what the succession device had recognized. There's something else, Kaelith said. The archaeological teams found another temple, southern continent. They think it might have records of the Empire's final years. The real history, not the Ascendancy's version. When do we leave? Tomorrow, if you're willing, Ethan grinned. Finally, something I'm actually qualified for. You're an emperor. You're qualified for that too. I'm an archaeologist playing emperor. No, she stepped closer, and the marks on both their arms pulsed softly. You're an emperor who happens to be an archaeologist. There's a difference. When did you become so wise? When I stopped trying to kill you and started listening instead. Fair point. They stood together in the command center, watching their impossible empire take shape. It wasn't the empire of 6 centuries ago. That one had died for good reasons. This was something new. Something built on partnership and shared authority, and the insane idea that maybe unity was possible. Ethan, yeah, I'm glad the artifact chose you. He looked at her, at this alien warrior who'd become his partner, his co-ruler, his friend. At the gold eyes that no longer held any killing intent. At the fierce competence and unexpected kindness that had emerged over months of impossible decisions made together. I'm glad it chose you too, he said quietly. The marks pulsed, synchronized. 2 heirs, 2 emperors, 2 very different people bound by accident and ancient technology, now choosing to stay together by something far more powerful. Trust. Tomorrow they'd fly to the southern continent, explore ancient ruins, search for truth about the empire that came before. But tonight, they had this moment, this quiet victory, this proof that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Come on, Kaelith said. The delegation is waiting. Lead the way, co-emperor. Together, co-emperor. They walked side by side into the future they were building, an empire of 2. It was enough. It was everything.